A lot to talk about. First, new information from a purported whistleblower suggests that Ghislaine Maxwell, who was convicted of helping Jeffrey Epstein traffic underage girls, may be trying to cut her 20-year prison sentence short. A source also alleges she's receiving VIP-style treatment behind bars, from customized meals to private visits, even a service puppy. And now the story has just shifted even further. A House committee has just released never-before-seen emails from Epstein's estate that for the first time directly mention President Trump, shedding new light on the world Maxwell was operating in and the powerful figures that may be connected to Epstein. We're going to break it all down for you right now with a former federal prosecutor and criminal defense attorney. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. By the way, one of the reasons that we've been able to stay on top of this Maxwell story, the Jeffrey Epstein story, is because we get incredible support from our sponsors like Wildgrain. Now, Wildgrain is the first bake from frozen subscription box for artisanal breads and pastries and pastas. And unlike store-bought items, Wildgrain actually uses simple, slow-fermented ingredients that are easy to digest and they're rich in nutrients. Plus, their boxes, they're fully customizable with loads of seasonal, gluten-free, plant-based options. Look, the holiday season, the party season, it's almost here, so you can try the cranberry pecan rolls, the apple pie bites. You just put them in the oven. They're going to be a great holiday item. So for a limited time, right now, Wildgrain is offering our listeners $30 off of your first box, plus free croissants in every box when you go to wildgrain.com/sidebar to start your subscription. That's wildgrain.com/sidebar, or you can use promo code sidebar at checkout. She was once the socialite at the center of one of the darkest scandals in modern American history. Ghislaine Maxwell, the person convicted for helping Jeffrey Epstein traffic and abuse underage girls. And now, she might be trying to walk her way out of a 20-year prison sentence. And the real question is, could it work? Will she be a free woman? The House Judiciary Committee claims that a whistleblower has now provided information and documents suggesting that Ghislaine Maxwell is preparing a commutation request, a formal plea for President Donald Trump to cut her sentence short. And according to the committee, these same sources indicate she could be receiving extraordinary help from inside the prison itself, even from the warden. We're talking about alleged customized meals, private visits, a service puppy. Apparently, according to this whistleblower, one prison official reportedly remarked he was, quote, sick of having to be Maxwell's. You get the idea. So, what is going on here? Would the Trump administration even consider this? And after everything we know about Epstein, the victims, the cover-ups, could Ghislaine Maxwell actually have her sentence commuted? Could she be released from prison? And who is this supposed whistleblower? These are the questions. These are the questions that we have. And we're going to try to dig into a lot of this on this episode of Sidebar. And we got an expert, by the way, who's going to join us in a moment to help unpack this. But first, before we even get to Ghislaine Maxwell herself, there is new information that could change everything, that could change the backdrop of all of this. Earlier this morning, the House Oversight Committee released a series of never-before-seen emails appearing to be from Jeffrey Epstein's own correspondence, messages that for the first time directly reference President Trump in connection with Epstein, and more specifically, his circle after his 2008 plea deal. Now, this is straight from the committee's own press release that was sent out earlier today. In one of those emails, dated 2011, Epstein appears to tell Ghislaine Maxwell, quote, I want you to realize that dog that hasn't barked is Trump. Victims spent hours at my house with him. He has never once been mentioned. And Maxwell appears to answer, I have been thinking about that. In another, dated 2019, Epstein appears to be writing to author Michael Wolff saying, quote, victim Mar-a-Lago. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff that's redacted. And it goes on to say, quote, Trump said he asked me to resign, never a member ever. Of course, he knew about the girls as he asked Ghislaine to stop. And a third, this one appears to be from 2015, appears to show Epstein and Wolff discussing whether they could, quote, craft an answer for Trump ahead of a CNN interview. Wolff responds, if he says he hasn't been on the plane or to the House, that gives you a valuable PR and political currency. Of course, it is possible that when asked, he'll say Jeffrey is a great guy and has gotten a raw deal, and is a victim of political correctness, which is to be outlawed in a Trump regime. Now, of course, those emails don't necessarily involve Ghislaine Maxwell directly. I mean, there seems to be some response, but they set the stage for the world that she's operating in right now. The powerful figures that may be connected to Epstein that surround her story, not necessarily saying they're part of anything that she was convicted of, but this is interesting. And with that in mind, I want to refocus on Maxwell herself and what is happening behind bars. Because Maxwell, this British socialite, this longtime companion, this co-conspirator of Jeffrey Epstein, was convicted back in 2021 on multiple federal charges, including sex trafficking minors for Epstein's purported operation. And she was sentenced to 20 years in prison. A jury found that over the course of years, she helped Epstein recruit and groom teenage girls, some as young as 14, for sexual abuse. Her conviction was upheld. It was upheld all the way through appeal. In fact, just last month, the Supreme Court refused to even hear her case. Now, you would think that that would be the end of her story, right? Maxwell behind bars, serving her time, except it isn't. It doesn't appear that that is what is going on, because what is now coming out from a supposed whistleblower is throwing yet another twist into this case. Now, you will remember that back in July, the Justice Department's Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche, sat down with Maxwell for what turned out to be a 2-day interview. And Blanche, by the way, also happens to be Donald Trump's former personal defense attorney. In that interview, Maxwell appeared to praise Donald Trump at certain points. She said he, quote, was always very cordial and, quote, very kind to me, and that she admired his, quote, extraordinary achievement in becoming president, and most notably, she denied ever seeing Trump act inappropriately in any setting connected to Jeffrey Epstein. She also claimed that she'd never seen Epstein, or any man for that matter, do anything inappropriate with women of any age, statements that the committee says are not true. 1 week later, after that interview, or just about, Maxwell was quietly transferred out of a Florida low-security prison into what's been described as a, quote, plum minimum security federal prison camp in Bryan, Texas. That transfer has raised a lot of eyebrows. Why? Because under the Bureau of Prisons policy, sex offenders aren't supposed to be housed in these minimum security camps, right? Maxwell has been, and that came very, very fast. Why? Back in August, the House Judiciary Committee, led by Representative Jamie Raskin, wrote to the Department of Justice and the Bureau of Prisons demanding answers about why and how that move was approved. You fast forward to now, those questions have exploded into something much bigger. This week, the committee says that it received whistleblower evidence and internal documents about Maxwell's treatment inside of that Texas prison, and about something even more shocking, her apparent push for a commutation of her 20-year sentence from President Donald Trump himself. In other words, could she be released from federal prison? Now, among the materials that the committee says it has are emails purportedly written by Maxwell, including one to her attorney, with the subject line, commutation application. In that email that was reported on by Politico, she admits she's, quote, struggling to keep it all together because, quote, there are so many attachments. Now, we ourselves haven't seen those emails, though these are documents that the House Judiciary Committee says it physically has. But all of that, the prison treatment, the transfer, this new commutation application, it appears to be part of what Raskin is calling essentially a quid pro quo arrangement between Maxwell and the Trump administration. Let's talk about it. So to help me break all this down, and there is a lot to break down, I want to welcome back on special guests. We got former federal prosecutor, criminal defense attorney, Gene Rossi, who I always love seeing. Gene, thank you so much for coming on. I got to start with what dropped this morning from the House Oversight Committee. It was literally right before we started this. So this is the first time that I think Congress has ever released Epstein's own apparent correspondence that directly or seemingly directly mentions President Donald Trump. So you have one message from 2011 that has Epstein seemingly writing to Ghislaine Maxwell that, quote, the dog that hasn't barked is Trump, saying a victim spent hours at his house with him. You have another from 2019 that says flat out, quote, Trump knew about the girls as he asked Ghislaine to stop. So Gene, okay, when we're talking about is Ghislaine Maxwell getting special treatment? Is she asking for her sentence to be commuted? When you read that, what do you take away from it? Because you also have to wonder, are Epstein and Maxwell reliable narrators?
Well, what those emails that you're talking about show to me is this. When Ghislaine Maxwell met with the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, Todd Blanche, the second in command, those emails suggest to me that she lied to him and that there was information that called into question the character of Donald Trump in 2011 or 2009. And that would trouble me greatly if those emails are as you say they are, because that goes to her credibility and it makes Todd Blanche look like a fool.
Do those emails carry any legal weight, either for the president? Could they open up investigative threads, new subpoenas? Because it is new. It is new information.
Well, because of the statute of limitations, you may have a problem there, but absolutely those emails could help investigative leads. They could help approaching her to find out what the real story is. If she meets with FBI agents or prosecutors in the future and she's confronted with those emails, she has a fork in the road. She can continue to lie, allegedly, or she can tell the truth. And I think the reason she was transferred to this cushy prison in Texas is stating the obvious. She gave them what they wanted. She gave the Deputy Attorney General Blanche what he wanted, what Trump wanted, and that is he was a choir boy, he was an Eagle Scout, and he never acted more than honorably. Those emails hurt the narrative that they're trying to portray, that Mr. Trump is above the fray and he didn't know about it, he wasn't involved, he wouldn't have approved it. Those emails, as you read them to me, I haven't seen them.
Yeah.
Pretty darn devastating.
Well, here's the other thing I was wondering. When Epstein allegedly writes about Trump having, quote, spent hours with an apparent victim, what would investigators do to corroborate that, to maybe disprove that? Are we talking phone logs, flight manifests, witness interviews? How do we know this isn't just a statement that he made, maybe to insulate himself in a way?
Well, for the FBI investigators and also congressional investigators, you would try to find a victim that they're talking about. And the first person I would go to find that name is Ghislaine Maxwell, because the name is probably something she's remembered or she's made a log of or has some recollection. That's point number one. Point number two, you can't go to the President of the United States. You would have a motion to quash. You have all kinds of separation of powers issue. But you can go to the people who may know the victim, who may have received information from the victim at the time it was occurring to corroborate her testimony. But the difficulty here, Jesse, is it's so many years back. We're talking 2011. It may be difficult to get good recollection about what happened. But the victim, if you find that victim or can identify that victim and she is willing to talk, that would be very explosive for any leads.
And then there's this third email where Jeffrey Epstein and Michael Wolff are allegedly strategizing about how to, quote, craft an answer for Donald Trump ahead of a CNN interview, where Wolff even appears to say if Trump lies about visiting Epstein's homes or planes, Epstein gains, quote, valuable PR and political currency. What does that correspondence suggest to you?
These Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein, beginning in the 90s, were two rising billionaires. And rising billionaires like to stay together. They like to hang together. You got videos of them at a party, yucking it up, telling jokes. They are good friends from the 90s. And you fast forward to 2011, they didn't just stop the relationship, as Mr. Trump suggested. They continued it. And whether there's an attraction to each other's money or they think that each other can help the other get more power, they had a symbiotic relationship. They were both billionaires. That alone suggests to me that Donald Trump is more involved, has to be proven, was more involved in the affairs of Jeffrey Epstein than President Trump wants to let on. And those emails support that argument.
Before we get into Maxwell, because I want to focus on her, bottom line, what do you think the implications of these emails are for the DOJ? Does this push them to release the broader Epstein files? Do you expect this maybe to just stay in the political lane, not the investigative lane, not a prosecutorial lane? What is going to be the effect of this?
All right, I used to work on the fourth floor of Main Justice at 9th and Pennsylvania Avenue in D.C. And I could tell you this, these emails, now that they're out, are causing a lot of agita amongst the Attorney General and especially Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General. Those emails make his meeting with her seem very questionable. In fact, they kind of shed light on his judgment and the judgment of the Attorney General when he met with them. The second thing is DOJ going to do anything, follow up on these leads? Of course not. They're too busy on retribution against Comey, against Letitia James, Adam Schiff, and God knows how many other political opponents. So they're not going to do anything with this. The only way we're going to get some action is if the chambers of the Congress change hands, either the House and or the Senate. And at that point, beginning in January of 2027, you're going to see congressional hearings where these witnesses, these emails, and all the things in that file are probably going to be disclosed. And the person leading that charge will be former American University law professor Jamie Raskin. That's where I went to law school. He's a pit bull, and he's going to hold hearings, and you're going to get to the bottom of this. Because I can say this, the reason the DOJ, the Attorney General, the Deputy Attorney General, and all those folks at Main Justice, and the reason the White House, including President Trump, are very leery of releasing the entire file is simple. Donald Trump's name's in the file, and it's probably not in a very flattering light. And these emails support that argument.
I want to go back to Ghislaine Maxwell. Okay, first of all, let's talk about requests to commute a sentence. Can you walk us through what the process is for a commutation application request? I guess a defendant or their legal counsel submits it, who reviews it, what role does the president play? And by the way, how is that different than a pardon?
That's a great question. Let me tell you what it was like before President Trump took office. There used to be a pardon attorney in his second term. There used to be in the Department of Justice a pardon attorney. Okay, I think her name was Liz Boyer. She got fired, basically. And the pardon attorney would accept applications either online or through the mail of either a pardon or a commutation. And that pardon attorney would review the application and make recommendations to not only the Attorney General, the Deputy Attorney General, but then to the White House. And it used to go through a very formal process. You didn't need to pay people to get it. You didn't have to have the highest contacts. Today, that pardon attorney has been eliminated. Now let's talk about the difference between a pardon and a commutation. A pardon is this: I am convicted and I'm sent to jail for 20 years. Or I have been charged and I'm awaiting trial, or I'm being investigated and possibly investigated, and there could be criminal hurdles in the horizon. A pardon says you are now erased of all those legal burdens, whether you're a target, whether you're waiting trial, or you've been convicted, so that your conviction or potential conviction will go away. Hunter Biden got pardoned. Many people got pardoned. So when you apply for jobs, it's not on your record. You're absolved. The difference between a pardon and a commutation is this: I'm sentenced to 20 years. I've served 8. I have 12 more to go. A commutation says, Mr. Rossi, you only have to serve 8. You can pack up your bags and leave the prison. Your sentence has been commuted. time served. The other 12 of those 20 years, forget about it. That's a commutation.
By the way, I wanted to ask you this. You know, the bombshell that she was communicating with her attorney about this commutation request, isn't that privileged? I mean, shouldn't that not even be part of the conversation? Shouldn't that not even be considered right now by the committee, or am I wrong about that?
Well, if the email was absconded or stolen, if you will, and it was between her attorney and Ghislaine Maxwell, then she has a cause of action against the person who absconded with that, whether it's a public official, a reporter, or somebody else. However, it could have been an email that was inadvertently given to a third party, which takes it out of privilege if it's released to a third party. I don't know the circumstances of how they got that email.
Okay, that's fair. Let me ask you about this, talking about how the process works. So according to the committee, they're alleging that, and this is, based on whistleblower information, that the warden at the Bryan Federal Prison is directly helping Maxwell copy, print, send documents related to that application. From your perspective, if that's true, how unusual is that?
Oh my goodness. Where should I begin? When a person is in a federal prison or a state prison, it is unheard of. It is unheard of, unprecedented, historic for the warden to be assisting any individual, let alone an individual of Ghislaine Maxwell's ilk. It is absolutely appalling that the warden in that prison in Texas, which is the most cushy prison for women you can possibly find, that the warden is helping her with her application is just appalling. It's disgraceful.
Now, connected to all that, you have ranking member Jamie Raskin, who sent a letter to President Trump on November 9th. And in it, he lays out the committee's concerns and demands answers. In fact, here's a passage that I want to read from it. Quote, "The House Committee on the Judiciary has now received whistleblower information indicating this cover-up goes even further into DOJ and BOP than was known before. Documents and information received over the last several days by this committee indicate that under Dr. Tanisha Hall, the warden of Federal Prison Camp FPC Bryan, the federal law enforcement staff working at the camp have been waiting on Miss Maxwell hand and foot. This information also indicates that Ghislaine Maxwell is working on filing a commutation application with your administration, demonstrating either that Miss Maxwell is herself requesting you release her from her 20-year prison sentence for her role as a co-conspirator in Jeffrey Epstein's international child sex trafficking ring, or that this child sex predator now holds such tremendous sway in the second Trump administration that you and your DOJ will follow her clemency recommendations. Meanwhile, any inmate or staff who questions or blows the whistle on the institution's grotesque pampering of a serial sexual abuser and human trafficker at taxpayer expense is being punished and retaliated against by Warden Hall. Within FPC Bryan, the deference and servility to Miss Maxwell have reached such preposterous levels that one of the top officials at the facility has complained that he is, quote, sick of having to be Maxwell's bleep. In light of these shocking revelations, I write to demand that you make your former personal attorney and now Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche available for a public hearing immediately with our committee to answer for this corrupt misuse of law enforcement resources and potential exchange of favors for false testimony exonerating you and other Epstein accomplices. What information is Miss Maxwell agreeing to suppress in order to receive such outlandishly favorable treatment as a federal prisoner and convicted sex offender? Now, look, the question is, could all of this have started with that interview that I mentioned before? Because as I mentioned earlier, in July, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, who again was formerly Donald Trump's personal attorney, sat down with Ghislaine Maxwell for what would become a 2-day interview inside the Florida facility where she was being held during the time. And during that conversation, she repeated a series of claims that prosecutors had already, by the way, disproved at trial, and in some cases, that contradicted her own sworn testimony, right? Let's play part of that exchange.
What did you observe as far as President Trump and his relationship with you or Mr. Epstein?
Well, I just want to say for my relationship with President Trump, relationship's a big word, but I just want to say that I met him, well, I believe I may have, because of my father in the 90s.
Yep. Okay.
So my father liked him very much, and he really liked his wife as well, because they were both Czechoslovakian. And as far as I'm concerned, President Trump was always very cordial and very kind to me. And I just want to say that I admire his extraordinary achievement in becoming the president now, and I like him, and I've always liked him. So that is the sum and substance of my entire relationship with him.
What about Mr. Epstein's relationship with him?
I don't know how they met, and I don't know how they became friends. I certainly saw them together, and I remember the few times I observed them together that they were friendly. I mean,
Was
they're
that
still
in
friendly.
social settings or was that in private settings?
I believe I only ever saw them in social settings. I don't recall any private settings.
Did you ever observe President Trump receive a massage?
Never. I think they were friendly, like people are in social settings. I don't think they were close friends, or I certainly never witnessed the president in any of, I don't recall ever seeing him in his house, for instance. I actually never saw the president in any type of massage setting. I never witnessed the president in any inappropriate setting in any way. The president was never inappropriate with anybody. In the times that I was with him, he was a gentleman in all respects.
Jean, okay, going back to this interview by Todd Blanche, how much, you mentioned it before, how much is that interview affecting this analysis of a commutation request, and what are the circumstances about whether or not the president would grant or be receptive to commuting her sentence? Because she is a convicted sex trafficker, and you wonder how you might be able to justify that from a political and legal point of view. We know that the president doesn't necessarily have to provide his reasons for why he would, pardon someone or commute a sentence, but talk to me about that interview that was conducted by Todd Blanche of Ghislaine Maxwell, and how much that's affecting the conversation, because I will also tell you, it seems that the House committee is saying that the answers in that interview are essentially false testimony, yet she faced, no follow-up charges, no sanctions. We talked about the effect of these emails. Talk to me about the effect of this interview on the commutation.
Well, let me just go to the beginning. When Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General, met with Ghislaine Maxwell, a convicted sex trafficker, and she had, I think, perjury charges that were dismissed because it was severed. But for him to meet with her while she's serving a 20-year sentence or more and just talk to her, that was an embarrassment. He lowered the integrity of that office by even meeting with her over 1 or 2 days. 2, that he took, without any challenge, her statements that President Trump was a perfect gentleman, didn't do anything wrong. And I don't think he used any exhibits, or there wasn't any vigorous cross-examination. He just took her word and moved on. And the third punchline I want to make is this. It is clear to me that she gave Todd Blanche and the White House indirectly exactly what they wanted. And within a New York minute, after that very favorable interview in which she allegedly lied to Todd Blanche, according to these emails, she was moved to another prison, in the one she's in now, where she's treated basically like a queen and treated like no other prisoner, even one who's not convicted of sex trafficking. No other prisoner on the planet gets treated like Ghislaine Maxwell is right now. And all you can say is this: quid pro quo. She scratched their back, then they scratched her back and basically silenced her. But the problem is this: if the Congress changes hands, she will be called as a witness before Congress. And the first thing I would tell her if I were her attorney is, you're now before Congress. You're subject to the pains and penalty of perjury. Don't make matters worse. But if she tells the truth before the House committee or the Senate, what does that say about her interview with Todd Blanche and an FBI agent? Because that was subject to a false statement charge if she lied. She's in a box. But here's why she's in a box. She's a convicted serial predator, and those people lie, lie, lie.
I wanted to ask you about this as well. In that November 9th letter, Raskin called on Deputy Attorney General Blanche to appear before Congress by November 17th, essentially for a hearing to explain a lot of this, to explain the interview, what the timeline of events was, about the interview, the transfer. Do you think he's going to appear? What is the committee hoping to get from that? Are there ways the administration can fight it? Talk to me about that.
They will fight it tooth and nail. He will not appear. They will invoke every privilege under the sun. They'll invoke the unitary power of the president, executive privilege, deliberative process privilege, attorney-client privilege. He will not testify. His body will not show up. I would be shocked if he ever takes the oath before any committee.
Now, I just want to go to something else, because this is about supposed accommodations that Maxwell has been receiving in jail. And you go back to August, the House Judiciary Committee in Raskin sent a blistering letter to Attorney General Pam Bondi and the Bureau of Prisons Director William Marshall. And they wanted to know one thing: why and how Ghislaine Maxwell was quietly moved from a medium security federal prison in Florida to what the committee called a far preferable and relatively luxurious minimum security prison camp in Bryan, Texas. It's a facility normally off limits to sex offenders. And part of that letter reads, quote, "2 weeks ago, you inexplicably transferred Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's co-conspirator, from a federal correctional institution to a far preferable and relatively luxurious minimum security prison camp in Texas just 3 years into her 20-year sentence for sexually exploiting and abusing minor girls as young as 14. The transfer follows Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche's private interviews of Miss Maxwell, arranged after a firestorm of media attention about the Department of Justice's refusal to release the full Epstein files as originally demanded by President Donald Trump. These actions raise substantial concerns that the administration may now be attempting to tamper with a crucial witness, conceal President Trump's relationship with convicted sex offenders, and coax Miss Maxwell into providing false or misleading testimony in order to protect the president. And further down it says, less than a week after Mr. Blanche's meeting with Miss Maxwell, BOP transferred her from a federal correctional institution in Tallahassee, Florida, to an all-woman minimum security prison camp in Bryan, Texas, which is listed as one of the, quote, best jails in America to serve time. And by the way, according to what the committee says is a whistleblower, Maxwell is getting treatment unlike anyone else in her facility. Her meals are customized and hand-delivered by staff. Her visitors are supposedly hosted in private catered areas with snacks and refreshments. Her communications are reportedly routed straight through the warden herself, who allegedly edits and scans her correspondence. Even when the phone lines went down for everybody else, Maxwell allegedly directed staff on who to call so she could still get through. She's also said to have access to a service puppy, which is normally off limits, and is escorted after hours to exercise in staff-only areas. So you put all that, and we've talked about it. But now you have a separate development, okay? So the Supreme Court recently declined to hear Ghislaine Maxwell's appeal. She had been challenging a 2007 non-prosecution agreement involving Jeffrey Epstein, the one that she argued should have protected her from some of the charges in New York. That agreement reportedly shielded Epstein and, quote, potential co-conspirators in Florida, but Maxwell's argument was that agreement applies to and binds all U.S. attorneys in every state in the country, broadly including the Southern District of New York, and the argument was, should be protected from prosecution. The Second Circuit disagreed, and the Supreme Court didn't even hear the case. They refused to take up the case, seemingly without explanation. The fact that the Supreme Court rejected her appeal, okay, how does that affect everything that's going on right now?
Well, if she hadn't gotten a ruling from the Supreme Court, then her commutation application would not be fruitful. Because when you're applying for a pardon or commutation and you're still on appeal, you could win your appeal, so you don't even have to have a commutation or a pardon. You get a new trial. So now that it's been resolved and she can't go any further beyond the Supreme Court, that helps her on a pardon or commutation application. And her attorney or attorneys are very smart. They're not seeking a pardon. That would be a bridge too far for President Trump to give her a complete pardon. But a commutation, I think, there's a 50-50 chance she's going to get it.
And if she gets it, she's free to live her life out the way that she wants?
If she gets a commutation, she's told, pack up your bags, and they escort her out of the prison, and she can get in a car, bus, plane, or train, and she's a free person.
Unbelievable. Gene Rossi, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. You can follow me on X or Instagram. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.